Layoffs, foreclosure, withdrawn distribution. Is this the Beerpocalypse? Beermageddon? Kinda. Hi, I'm Frank, and this is Beer Esquire. Folks have been predicting a bloodletting in the industry for a long time due to slow growth and literally thousands of new breweries starting up, and recent news suggests that 2018 might be the year it occurs. First up, Summit Brewing of St. Paul, Minnesota laid off 10% of its 100-odd employees at the end of 2017. It's the first time it's been forced to do so in its 32-year history. And then there's Medocino Brewing Company, which has an even older history going back to 1983. When it first opened, it was only the second new brewpub opened since the repeal of Prohibition. Medocino and its sister brewery, Old Saratoga Brewing, rapidly disintegrated in January. And I mean rapidly. For example, Braven Brewery of Brooklyn was given 72 hours to retrieve $70,000 worth of stuff. Crazy. Next, there's Smuttynose Brewery.
We kept our company afloat by digging deep into our own pockets. Now they're hoping a buyer or investor will bail out the craft brewery founded in Hampton in 1994.
The co-owners hope that the new buyer continues to employ Smuttynose's 68 employees who are still working at least until the March 9th auction occurs. Finally, there's Green Flash, a San Diego brewery originally that just recently built a $20 million facility in Virginia Beach. It announced that it laid off about 15% of its staff and furthermore had pulled out of 32 state markets. It's currently pitching itself to new investors to pay down debt owed to Comerica Bank. Given all this recent news, you cannot count me as a potential investor. What do these recent events tell us? Well, in the first place, it looks like business is pretty rough for a middle-sized brewery. While all four of these breweries put together make maybe 1% of the volume of Miller Coors and less than AB InBev by volume, they're each among the top 150 largest breweries in the country, according to the TTB. Most growth in the industry seems to be occurring in small breweries. 2011 to 2016, the number of taxed breweries increased 150% to 5,000. And the volume of beer produced by small breweries, for example, those under 7,500 barrels a year, nearly doubled in this period. Meanwhile, production from breweries of this size, about 30,000 to a million barrels, has been basically flat. And this analysis is a little bit sloppy because breweries have grown in this period to go from one category to another. But other data backs up the observation that middle-sized breweries aren't really growing. For example, the Medocino Brewery is a public company, having directly offered its stock on six-packs back in the 90s, and reports filed with the SEC since 2011 reflect that both revenue and production have declined. That said, Medocino is probably a unusual case because of its eccentric owner who is currently facing extradition to India for alleged fraud and tax evasion.
Will you be challenging the evidence presented by the government?
Come inside and hear.
The reports of other public companies tell a similar story. For example, last week stock in Boston Beer Company fell when it was reported that they had lost nearly 6% year-over-year sales and were projecting optimistically that they'll increase 0 to 6% in the coming year, which would be a vast improvement over the last couple of years where they've been declining. Likewise, the revenue at Craft Beer Alliance, a company that owns brands like Widmer and Red Hook, is not actually a craft brewer because of big beer investment. Well, its revenue also peaked in 2015 and appears to be declining. One might object that Sam Adams and Red Hook are hardly representative of the vibrant craft industry, but in another sense they do represent it, or part of it anyways. Take Smuttynose, for example. I loved this beer when I lived in Boston a few years ago. I still have a Smut Labs beer in my fridge. And yet, bottle shop owners in New Hampshire say it's the kind of beer that senior citizens buy. And the editor for Beer Advocate says that Smuttynose produces great examples of American craft beer 5 to 10 years ago. So for these breweries, which are all older, and with the exception of Green Flash, all survived the shakeout in the beer industry that occurred in 1997, they're now seen as sort of past their prime. And while these four breweries are very different, they all reflect a few broad trends plaguing mid-sized or regional segments of the beer production industry. Number one, overcapacity. All of these breweries had entirely too much production capital for their production, and apparently too much debt. At least 3 of these breweries were contract brewing for others in order to use up some of their excess capacity, I'm not sure about Green Flash, but the others certainly were. For example, Bottles of Night Shift Brewing, a hip 2011 founded brewery in a Boston suburb, were coming out of your grandfather's Smuttynose factory in New Hampshire. And then there's debt. All of the breweries except Medocino recently paid for shiny new facilities, and we know from Medocino's last annual report with the SEC that they were carrying almost $15 million in debt. And maybe taking on debt was dumb, but it used to be the conventional wisdom. The president of Provident Bank, which is foreclosing on Smuttynose, said, "It's an industry change that affected the singular business. It's affecting many mid-sized firms that are starting to get hurt for the same reasons. It's not that they did anything wrong. In fact, they did everything right. But the industry and market changed."
We've seen more changes in our industry in the last few years than in the previous 3 decades.
The Beerpocalypse is for mid-sized breweries, and the 4 horsemen of the Beerpocalypse are heavy competition from smaller, cooler breweries, declining sales leading to excess capacity and unsustainable debt. I wish no craft brewer would have to make layoffs or sell their brewery, but when I look at the Brewers Association list of the top 50 craft beer companies, I have to think that Beermageddon will be ugly, and it might last for a long time. I hope that all you guys that expanded recently turn out to be fine, but beer consumption in this country is actually declining overall. And the craft segment is not growing like it once was, and certainly not the regional or mid-sized craft brewers. So it seems like some investments out there aren't going to pan out, but I wish all craft brewers good luck. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. Make any angry or supportive comments below, and I'll see you hopefully next week when I intend to post again.